Ethan Blackwood stood at the towering window of his marble estate, the city skyline glittering beneath him like a bed of shattered glass. But inside him, there was nothing but hollow silence, the kind that grows inside a man who's taught himself never to feel. His father's sudden death had carved that lesson deep into his bones, while his mother's cold, ruthless ambition cemented it, teaching him that vulnerability was nothing but a weapon for others to wield against him. And so when the idea of marriage arose, not for love, but for business, Ethan agreed without hesitation, seeing Scarlett Monroe not as a partner, but as a transaction, another calculated move in the relentless chess game that was his life. Yet when Scarlett arrived at his grand mansion that late autumn evening, wearing a simple white dress that whispered against her skin like silk in the wind, her emerald eyes glistening with a quiet combination of fear and silent defiance, something inside Ethan flickered. A strange, unwelcome warmth he quickly smothered. She was breathtaking, not because of wealth or polish, but because of the pure, unfiltered grace she carried in every delicate movement. Unlike the hollow socialites who dripped in jewels but starved for meaning, she was real, and that reality threatened the fortress he had built around his heart. But he refused to acknowledge it, refused to let it breach his carefully guarded world. And so, on their wedding night, as moonlight sliced through the vast bedroom like a blade, casting cold silver shadows across the room, he stood before her with an icy resolve, his voice void of emotion as he spoke words that sliced sharper than any sword. "I will never touch you," he declared, his tone as lifeless as the contract that bound them. "This marriage is a contract, nothing more." And though Scarlett's face remained composed, her eyes shimmered for a brief moment, betraying the sting that burned within her chest. For she had entered this marriage out of duty, out of sacrifice, not greed. Her family's financial ruin had driven her to accept this arrangement. But secretly buried beneath layers of duty, there was a tender hope, a fragile belief that perhaps, with time, love might find its way into this cold arrangement. Yet Ethan's vow shattered that hope instantly, like glass beneath a merciless heel, and though her heart clenched painfully, she summoned a soft, almost sorrowful smile and whispered, "As you wish, Mr. Blackwood," her words floating like fragile petals in the vast emptiness of the room. The silence that followed was suffocating, heavy with everything unspoken, everything denied, and as days bled into nights and nights into weeks, the mansion stood as a monument of luxury, yet resonated with an aching emptiness, where two souls shared space but not hearts, where glances were stolen but never held, where conversations were polite but void of warmth. And while Ethan buried himself in his empire, chasing numbers and power, Scarlett roamed the vast halls like a beautiful ghost, her presence haunting yet graceful. And though she maintained her composure, behind closed doors, she often stood before the mirror, questioning if she was strong or simply breaking silently. She wasn't like the women Ethan was accustomed to. There was no hunger in her eyes for his wealth, no schemes to manipulate him, only quiet strength wrapped in vulnerability. And though Ethan told himself that was exactly why she was dangerous, why he must keep his distance, in truth, it was the very thing that both terrified and fascinated him. Yet he hardened his resolve, reminding himself of his promise, of the danger love posed, of the power his mother warned him never to surrender. But little did he know, in trying to suffocate his emotions, he was planting seeds of tension that would one day bloom into something neither of them could control. For behind the marble walls of his estate, behind the empty dinners and polite smiles, storms were gathering, storms that neither Ethan's iron will nor Scarlett's quiet endurance would be able to contain much longer. The cold air inside the Blackwood mansion grew heavier as days quietly slipped into weeks, their marriage like a pristine porcelain vase, untouched, flawless on the outside, yet hollow and dangerously fragile within. Every morning they sat across from each other at the long mahogany dining table, where polished silverware gleamed under the grand chandelier. Yet the space between them felt like an endless void, filled with unspoken words neither dared to voice. But beneath Ethan's steely exterior, something unexpected began to flicker. each glance at Scarlett's graceful movements, the way her honey blonde hair cascaded like silk down her shoulders, how her emerald eyes held not desperation but quiet dignity, ignited unfamiliar tremors in his well-guarded soul. And though he fought it fiercely, his icy blue eyes often softened in fleeting moments of weakness, betraying the barricades he desperately clung to. Scarlett, too, sensed the cracks forming in his armor, noticing how his gaze lingered just a heartbeat longer, how his breath seemed to hitch ever so slightly when their hands brushed accidentally while passing the salt. And though he never uttered words of affection, his silence now carried an undercurrent of tension neither of them could ignore. Yet in the shadows of their fragile connection lurked a venomous presence. Vivian Blackwood, whose sharp eyes missed nothing, watching like a hawk perched above its prey, her hatred for Scarlett brewing like poison in a sealed vial. Vivian had always envisioned her son with someone of elite pedigree, a woman molded from the same ruthless ambition that defined the Blackwood dynasty. Not this simple, pure-hearted girl whose very existence threatened to soften Ethan's iron resolve. And one afternoon, unable to contain her contempt, Vivian cornered Scarlett in the towering grand hall, her voice dripping with venomous disdain as her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around a crystal glass. "You'll ruin him," she spat, eyes narrowing like a predator sizing its target. "You're nothing but a pawn in a world far above your league." But Scarlett, though her heart hammered like a trapped bird, stood her ground, her voice steady as a quiet storm. "I married him for my family, but I will never let anyone humiliate me. Not even you, Mrs. Blackwood." And in that moment, two worlds silently declared war under the shimmering chandeliers. Vivian's fury only deepened, for she wasn't accustomed to resistance, and so, with a twisted smile, she retreated, but only to devise her venomous schemes, slipping half-truths into Ethan's ear, sowing seeds of doubt with her manipulative whispers, suggesting Scarlett's kindness was calculated, her motives impure, her loyalty questionable. And though Ethan brushed off her remarks outwardly, late at night when the mansion drowned in eerie stillness, those poisoned words echoed like ghosts in his mind, fanning sparks of confusion and suspicion he fought to suppress. While Vivian wove her web, another shadow crept back into their lives. Daniel Harrington, Ethan's former closest friend turned bitter rival, whose betrayal in business had once driven a permanent wedge between them, now returned with a dangerous interest, his sharp smile oozing false charm as he circled Scarlett like a vulture drawn to vulnerability, offering her flattering compliments and poisoned sympathy. "If your husband won't cherish you," he whispered one evening at a charity gala, his voice a silk-wrapped blade, "perhaps someone else will." And though Scarlett recoiled from his audacity, her polite yet firm rejection only fueled Daniel's determination, sensing opportunity in Ethan's emotional distance and Vivian's mounting hostility, for he knew the cracks in their marriage could be pried open with the right pressure. As the days grew darker, the mansion's luxurious halls whispered with rumors and suspicions. Where glances carried weight, silence screamed louder than arguments, and every smile masked hidden agendas. Scarlett fought to maintain her dignity amidst the tightening noose of manipulation. Ethan battled the war within his heart, torn between his growing yet denied feelings for his wife and the toxic seeds his mother relentlessly planted. And in the shadows, Daniel watched, waiting as the intricate web of betrayal slowly took shape, each thread pulling them closer toward a storm neither of them yet fully saw coming. The weight of unspoken words hung in the mansion's suffocating air, thick and choking like a storm cloud waiting to burst. And as the poisonous web woven by Vivian reached its climax, she struck with calculated cruelty, delivering to Ethan a folder of damning photographs, fabricated, expertly edited images that showed Scarlett in intimate proximity with Daniel Harrington, their staged smiles and manipulated closeness bleeding like poison onto glossy paper. And though Ethan's rational mind whispered caution, the sight of those pictures ignited a wildfire within him, consuming logic, feeding his long-buried insecurities and the venomous seeds his mother had so carefully planted. His chest tightened as betrayal's bitter taste filled his mouth, not just at the thought of Scarlett's supposed infidelity, but at his own weakness for having allowed his walls to ever lower, for having almost dared to feel. And now that flicker of emotion twisted into something darker. Anger, humiliation, and heartbreak he couldn't admit aloud. Instead of confrontation, Ethan withdrew like a wounded predator, retreating to lick unseen wounds, erecting a towering wall of silence that grew thicker with each passing hour. His once brief glances of tenderness now replaced by piercing stares void of warmth, like shards of winter ice embedding themselves into Scarlett's trembling heart. She felt the shift instantly, sensing the growing void between them, becoming a bottomless chasm of confusion and sorrow. Her stomach twisting as the man who once offered cold distance now served suffocating coldness, laced with barely concealed contempt, and yet she had no understanding of why. Night after night, Scarlett paced their lavish bedroom, her fingertips grazing the polished edges of ornate furniture that felt colder than ever. Her reflection in the gilded mirror, revealing swollen eyes clouded with tears she fought to suppress. And as the mansion's grand halls echoed with the haunting absence of their laughter, she finally broke under the pressure one fragile evening, her voice barely more than a breath as she approached him, desperation quivering in every syllable. "Ethan, what have I done?" But instead of answers, his arctic gaze sliced through her like a blade, his words sharp and distant. "Spare me your innocent act." Each word crashing into her chest like crashing waves that stole her breath and replaced it with searing pain. Unable to comprehend the cruel distance, Scarlett's nights turned into hollow rituals of silent sobbing beneath silk sheets that offered no comfort, her tears soaking into the fabric like invisible scars, as questions tormented her mind. How could something that never had a chance to bloom crumble so violently? While Ethan, too, sat alone in the dim glow of his private study, his hands gripping the edges of his mahogany desk until his knuckles whitened, his heart whispering of Scarlett's honesty and the way her emerald eyes always met his without a trace of deception. But pride shackled him mercilessly, convincing him that any doubt was weakness. And so the mansion became a silent battlefield, where no words were exchanged, yet the tension screamed louder than the fiercest argument, where the clinking of cutlery at dinner sounded like the ticking of a time bomb, and every accidental glance between them burned with unspoken agony. Outside, the autumn winds howled against the tall glass windows, as if echoing the storm raging inside their hearts. And while Vivian smirked in the shadows, basking in the success of her wicked orchestration, and Daniel circled like a vulture awaiting the fall of his prey, Ethan and Scarlett remained prisoners of a painful silence neither knew how to break, both drowning in a sea of shattered trust and wounded pride. As the mansion's suffocating silence thickened with each passing day, the heavens mirrored the turmoil inside, with relentless rain drumming against the towering windows like nature's own heartbeat of sorrow. And on one such gray afternoon, Scarlett, seeking solace in mindless tasks, wandered into Ethan's private study, a room soaked in memories she was forbidden to touch, but now entered as if drawn by invisible threads of fate. While dusting the polished shelves and rearranging scattered papers, her fingers accidentally brushed against the edge of an old portrait of Ethan's late father, its heavy frame slightly tilted, revealing a thin slit behind it, and curiosity sparked within her wounded heart, compelling her to reach behind the canvas where her fingertips met the cool edge of a sealed envelope aged by time, its parchment slightly yellowed, but the Blackwood family crest still gleaming under the dim light. With hesitant breath, she broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter inside, her eyes tracing each handwritten word penned by a man whose wisdom had been long buried beneath his widow's iron fist. "Ethan, never let your mother control your heart like she controls your business. Love freely. Don't fear vulnerability. It's not weakness, but your greatest strength." And as the weight of the message settled into her trembling hands, Scarlett's pulse quickened, her mind spinning as the puzzle pieces finally began snapping into place, revealing the hidden roots of Ethan's guarded soul, the armor he had built not from arrogance, but from inherited wounds and manipulated fears, planted carefully by Vivian, who now ruled his life like a puppet master, disguised in motherly devotion. Fueled by a surge of both fury and heartbreaking empathy, Scarlett clenched the letter to her chest, her determination hardening like steel as she marched down the grand hall to confront the woman who had orchestrated their misery. Finding Vivian seated elegantly in the sunroom, sipping her tea, surrounded by orchids that masked the poison in her veins, Scarlett's voice cut through the air like a blade, her tone steady though her heart pounded violently. "Tell me the truth, Mrs. Blackwood. How long have you manipulated your own son into fearing love?" And for a fleeting moment, Vivian's perfect mask faltered, her eyes narrowing as if calculating her next move. But faced with the undeniable fire in Scarlett's gaze, she chose bitter honesty over denial, her voice icy yet shameless. "I protected my son. Weakness is not a luxury the Blackwoods can afford. And women like you, sentimental, naive, you are dangerous," she sneered, her words laced with twisted pride, as though her cruelty was a mother's ultimate sacrifice. Yet as Vivian reveled in her confession, Scarlett, with calculated calm, let her phone continue recording from within her pocket, capturing every poisonous word for the storm that was yet to come, though she made no immediate move to expose it, for a deeper desire rooted itself in her aching heart. This was never about winning through evidence, but about reaching Ethan's heart directly, to have him look into her eyes and see her soul untainted, to trust her not because of proof, but because of love, because only then would the chains his mother wrapped around him finally shatter. And so she walked away that evening, her resolve stronger than ever, holding both the damning recording and the father's heartfelt letter close, praying silently that Ethan would choose love over fear before it was too late. As outside the rain intensified, drumming an urgent melody against the mansion's towering facade, a storm brewing not only in the sky but within the fragile hearts of the Blackwood estate. As the storm raged gently outside, its rhythmic patter on the glass windows serving as a fragile soundtrack to the tension within, Scarlett stood before the dining table she had carefully set, the soft glow of candlelight casting a warm hue across her silk gown that swayed with every nervous breath she took. She had chosen simplicity, allowing her natural beauty to speak louder than any jewels or elaborate displays, her emerald eyes glistening beneath the soft amber light as the fire in the nearby hearth crackled softly, filling the cavernous dining hall with a quiet intimacy they hadn't shared since their wedding night. Ethan entered silently, his tall frame pausing momentarily as his blue eyes took in the delicate scene. Her small, deliberate efforts felt like whispers calling him home from a long, bitter exile. Without a word, he sat across from her, the heavy silence between them, thick with all the words neither had dared to voice for so long, and for a few endless seconds, the only sound was the faint clinking of cutlery as she nervously adjusted a napkin. Then his voice finally broke the stillness, low and weighted. "Why haven't you left me?" A simple question, but one that carried all the pain, the guilt, and the disbelief he had buried beneath years of mistrust and pride. Scarlett's breath hitched, her throat tightening as emotion surged forward, and though her voice trembled, it carried unshakable truth as she met his gaze and whispered, "Because I fell for you, Ethan. Not your money, not your name. You." Her confession slicing through his armor like sunlight, breaking through the darkest storm clouds. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, his features softened, his cold exterior melting into quiet vulnerability as the storm inside him finally yielded. His hand reached across the table, fingers slightly trembling as they found hers, their touch electric yet tender. Skin against skin, whispering apologies their lips could not yet form. "Scarlett," he murmured, his voice cracking beneath the weight of long-suppressed emotion. "I've been a coward. I was so afraid of love, of losing control." And in that simple truth, years of pain unraveled between them like silk unraveling in the breeze, replaced by an aching tenderness neither had dared believe possible, drawn together by a force greater than any contract or vow. Ethan slowly rose from his chair, stepping closer until the flickering firelight illuminated the depth of his blue eyes, reflecting not power or pride, but the raw, naked honesty of a man finally surrendering to his heart. Scarlett stood to meet him, her breath mingling with his, their closeness creating a quiet world where only they existed. And as his hand gently cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away a stray tear that traced her flushed skin, their lips finally met. Not rushed, not hungry, but slow and reverent, as though afraid to break the fragile magic of that moment. Their first kiss was not one of passion, but of healing, of two broken souls cautiously stitching themselves together with every gentle press, every sigh shared beneath the soft amber glow. The fire crackled behind them like a witness to their surrender. Their bodies pressed close, not in hunger, but in quiet unity, their hearts beating a synchronized melody of forgiveness, hope, and newfound trust. In that moment, words became unnecessary, for their souls spoke a language far deeper than any vow could contain, a silent promise born not from obligation, but from love finally free to breathe. As the soft afterglow of their first real night together still lingered like a fragile promise in the corners of the mansion, Scarlett knew the time for truth had come. While Ethan's heart was finally open, the wounds his mother inflicted still festered beneath the surface. And so, with steady hands but pounding heart, she retrieved the recorded confession from her pocket, gently placing the device before him as they sat across from one another. Their entwined fingers now symbols of trust they were both desperate to protect. As Vivian's cold voice echoed through the small speaker, her shameless manipulations, her poisonous pride, her twisted justification for years of pain, Ethan's expression hardened, his blue eyes darkening with each bitter word until the recording ended, leaving behind only the crackling silence of betrayal thick in the air. "My own mother," he whispered hoarsely, his voice fractured under the weight of disillusionment. The woman who once cradled him as a child now exposed as the architect of his deepest fears and brokenness, and the raw hurt in his eyes pierced Scarlett's soul. Yet she reached out, placing her hand gently over his, anchoring him to the present, her voice a soft but unwavering balm. "We can face it together, Ethan. You're not alone anymore." And for a moment it seemed like their long battle was finally nearing peace. But fate, as cruel as ever, was not yet finished testing them. For lurking in the shadows of their victory was Daniel Harrington, whose bruised ego and failed manipulations had fermented into venomous revenge. And while Ethan had been learning to love, Daniel had been plotting his final assault, leaking confidential Blackwood company files to the media, files twisted to look like financial crimes and corporate corruption. Within mere hours, the world around them spiraled into chaos, headlines blaring across every screen. Blackwood empire crumbles amid scandal. Boardrooms filled with furious executives demanding Ethan's resignation, stock prices crashing as if pulled into an endless abyss, and once loyal partners now whispering doubts fueled by greed and public hysteria. Yet as Ethan stood at the edge of his crumbling kingdom, shoulders heavy with guilt and shame, it was Scarlett who refused to waver, her strength shining brighter in the face of disaster. She stood before a sea of flashing cameras and unforgiving reporters, her voice steady, eyes blazing with unshakable conviction, her words slicing through the lies like swords of truth. "Behind every great man isn't just a woman, but a partner who believes even when the world turns its back," she declared, her tone commanding both respect and empathy, her poise unraveling the carefully spun web of Daniel's deceit. As the public watched this woman, once dismissed as nothing more than a pawn, now standing fiercely beside the man she loved, hearts slowly began to shift, and the tide turned with whispers of admiration growing louder than the scandal itself. As shareholders reconsidered, supporters returned, and the very empire Daniel sought to destroy began to steady under the force of a love that refused to break beneath the weight of betrayal. As the dust of betrayal slowly settled and the once roaring flames of scandal dwindled into faint embers, the world watched in awe as Ethan Blackwood rose from the ashes of public disgrace, his company no longer defined by fabricated headlines but by resilience, integrity, and the unwavering truth that had finally surfaced. The courtroom had echoed with damning evidence against Daniel Harrington, his smug confidence unraveling as one piece after another of his fraudulent empire collapsed beneath him, leaving him in cold, unrelenting handcuffs as the gavel of justice fell hard, stripping him of his wealth, his influence, and the reputation he once weaponized so mercilessly. Vivian Blackwood, once the untouchable queen of high society, found herself abandoned by the very world she had once manipulated. Her name now whispered with pity and contempt in the lavish circles where she had once ruled, the grand doors of socialite ballrooms forever closed to her, leaving her to confront the bitter solitude of the very fortress of pride she had built for herself. But for Ethan and Scarlett, amidst the ruins of betrayal stood something far more precious than any corporate empire. A love forged not in ease but in trial, not in comfort, but in the crucible of pain, trust, and unbreakable loyalty. And so, with the city's noise far behind them, they escaped to a secluded beach where the only audience to their redemption would be the whispering waves, the warm breeze, and the golden sun dipping gracefully into the endless horizon. Barefoot on the soft sand, with nothing but the symphony of nature around them, Ethan stood before Scarlett, his sharp blue eyes now softened by a depth of love once foreign to him, his heart no longer encased in iron but wide open, his soul exposed without fear or hesitation. His hands trembled, not with uncertainty, but with the weight of gratitude, as he reached for hers, their fingers lacing together like two souls long destined to reunite. And with the rhythmic crash of the waves behind him, he spoke softly, his voice raw with emotion. "You shattered my vow the first night, Scarlett, and I thank God every single day that you did. Because you taught me that love isn't weakness, it's everything." Scarlett's eyes shimmered like emeralds beneath the setting sun, her tears catching the fading light and glittering like precious diamonds as her lips curved into a tender smile, her own voice thick with unshed emotion as she replied, "This time, Ethan, let's vow never to build walls between us again, never to let fear speak louder than our hearts." The minister's gentle words carried on the breeze as they exchanged their renewed vows, not born from obligation or arrangements, but from the deepest corners of their souls. Every promise laced with lessons painfully earned and a devotion now indestructible. As Ethan slid the new ring onto Scarlett's delicate finger, his thumb brushing against her skin with reverence, their eyes locked in a gaze that needed no words to speak volumes, and as the sun kissed the edge of the sea, painting the sky in strokes of crimson and gold, they sealed their new beginning with a kiss so tender, so full of promise, that the world around them seemed to pause in quiet reverence. Their lips met with gentle urgency, a meeting of hearts free from the shadows that once haunted them. Their embrace no longer weighed down by doubt, but lifted by a lightness that only true forgiveness and enduring love can bring. As the soft breeze played with Scarlett's hair and the waves hummed their endless lullaby, Ethan whispered again against her lips, "From this moment, there is no vow stronger than our hearts beating together. No force greater than what we've built, Scarlett. Our love survived storms that tried to drown us, and now, nothing can break us." With every word, Scarlett's heart swelled. The memories of silent nights, painful misunderstandings, cruel betrayals, and whispered fears now washed away by the overwhelming peace of this sacred union. Nearby, their small circle of true friends and loyal staff watched with tearful smiles, knowing they were witnessing not just a wedding renewal, but the rebirth of two souls who had refused to surrender to bitterness. As twilight settled, tiny lanterns flickered to life along the shoreline, casting soft golden glows that danced across the waves like tiny stars celebrating their love. And hand in hand, Ethan and Scarlett walked barefoot through the surf, leaving behind footprints that the tide would eventually erase, but never the path their hearts had traveled. Their journey had been cruel and unforgiving, yet it had carved out a bond so pure it could withstand any tempest. In the distance, the gentle hum of violin strings floated in the air, the melody sweet and haunting, as if the universe itself composed a song for their love. A love that was no longer fragile, but mighty, rooted in truth and sealed in grace. As night embraced them beneath a blanket of stars, Ethan pulled Scarlett closer, resting his forehead against hers, his voice now a sacred whisper only she could hear. "The painful silence once tore us apart, but now, Scarlett, our hearts will forever sing."